Kirtop here, and these are 100 excavations, after which scientists were forbidden to publish the results. The Urns of Amazonia. When a tree fell deep in the Brazilian Amazon, the rounded edges of pottery appeared under its roots. Archaeologists uncovered 7 burial urns, 2 of which were especially large. Inside were human bones, and nearby were the bones of fish and turtles. The urns were only about 40 centimeters below the surface, probably under old houses. There were no ceramic lids. It seems they were covered with organic material that has rotted away. The site is Lake Cachila in the municipality of Fonta Boa. Here, on the high floodplains, artificial islands were built centuries ago. This wasn't a whim, but engineering. Soil mixed with ceramic fragments was brought in and arranged so the platform could support a house and resist floods. The urns were found on this platform. The ceramics show an unexpected mix of techniques, plus a rare green clay known from only a few places in the region. Why fish and turtles ended up in the urns along with people is still an open question. It could have been part of a ritual, a household detail, or a sign of a connection to water. These are still just hypotheses, but the layout of the site, the artificial islands, and the recurring shapes of the vessels point to a regular practice, not a one-time event. The urns are now in the Tefi laboratory. Dating will use organic material isotopes and paste comparisons. The tradition's name may emerge. The flag that no one found? This banner had its own biography, longer than that of many people. The cloth is from Munich, 1923. After the beer hall putsch, it was stained with the blood of the fallen. From that moment, the item became a relic. At party rallies, they consecrated new standards with it, and the single standard bearer's name was memorized to preserve the cult. At parades, it did not march with the crowd, but was escorted at the front under guard. Not just anyone was allowed to touch the cloth. Only those permitted to grant their banners some sacred status could approach. Beyond that is what people prefer to forget. In peacetime, any cult needs safekeeping and a schedule. Blutfahne was kept in Munich, in party premises, where it was returned after rituals. Records listed hall numbers, Congress trips, and a unique storage regime. The fetish followed a schedule, a ceremonial procession, a brief ritual, then the return trip to the cabinet, where it waited until the next important day. The relic's finale began before 1945. Due to the bombings, archives, offices, and halls, once thought eternal, had to be hidden, moved, and packed away. There are versions saying the banner was evacuated, and others that it remained in Munich until the end. After the city fell, the trail diverges. Some say that the Allies took it along with other party paraphernalia, and somewhere in the inventories, it is listed under a generic inventory number. One version says the cloth burned in building fires with paper archives. Another claims it ended up in private hands. A trophy without documents, cut into pieces and dispersed as a souvenir of history. Why did they part with such a sacred object so easily? Because at the moment of collapse, sanctity ceases to protect. When the legend collapses, the artifact is left with only the cloth and the shaft. All the security mechanisms, passes, guards, and lists disappear overnight. And if there is no clear label on the box, the item becomes just an item. That's how the flag, which had been the center of a cult for decades, dissolved among boxes, safes, fire, and foreign hands. Over the post-war years, the Blutfahne surfaced dozens of times. In newspaper articles, in eyewitness accounts, at auctions with pieces of the original. Not a single sensation stood up to scrutiny. Either the fabric is too new, or the paint is from the wrong era, or the origin story falls apart at the very first date. And this is a rare case when absence speaks louder than any exhibit. The flag, around which they tried to build eternity, did not survive the end of the institution that created it. What's left are photos, ceremony protocols, flag bearers' surnames, and emptiness where the object was. The contact hinted at by Bush Sr. One phrase from George Bush Sr. has long since become legendary. When he was asked about UFOs, he simply replied, "Some events from the 60s we will not explain." And almost everyone remembered New Mexico in 1964. Patrolman Lonnie Zamora saw a flash near the hill and thought it was an accident. But at the scene, he came across a metallic oval object on 4 legs and 2 small figures in white suits, shorter than a human. The movement was quick, like that of technicians doing their job. Zamora came closer. The object roared, rose vertically, and disappeared. On the ground, there were prints from the supports melted sand, and traces of heat exposure that did not match any known technology. An hour later, the area was cordoned off by the FBI, the Air Force, and staff. Reports were collected, analyses were conducted, and everything instantly became classified. No attempts to ridicule the witness, no fireballs or weather balloons, only silence. And when years later Bush hinted at events that it was too soon to discuss, it became clear to many that he was talking about this very encounter. One of the most well-documented cases of a landing by an unidentified object. Urns underground fortress. Imagine an ordinary sunny day in 2006. A resident of the small Iranian town of Nushava decided to dig a well in his backyard, but after another blow with his pickaxe, the ground literally disappeared from under his feet. The man didn't fall into water, but into a bottomless black void that concealed a secret buried under the sands for 1,500 years. That's how the city of Uyi was accidentally discovered. An incredible underground metropolis, which today is called one of the most complex fortification structures of antiquity. The archaeologists who arrived at the site were amazed by its scale. This is not just a system of basements or shelters. It's a full-fledged underground counterpart to the city above that goes down 3 complete levels underground. The first level starts at a depth of 4 meters, and the lowest one goes almost 18 meters underground. All of this was carved out by hand in solid rock back in the time of the Sassanid dynasty. Why did the ancient Persians need to build an entire civilization underground? The answer lies in the history of constant wars. For centuries, this region was a battleground for raids by Mongols, Arabs, and other nomads. The people of Nushabad found a brilliant way to protect themselves. Instead of building high walls, they simply disappeared. When the dust from the hooves of enemy cavalry appeared on the horizon, the entire population of the city went underground. The entrances to Uyi were disguised as wells, hidden in dense thickets, or even inside ordinary residential houses. The enemies could camp for weeks right above the heads of thousands of people without even suspecting their existence. The technical design of Uyi baffles modern engineers, making them wonder how thousands of people could stay in an enclosed space for weeks without suffocating. The secret lay in a unique ventilation system. Ancient builders carved vertical shafts that connected all 3 levels to the surface. Due to the difference in temperature and pressure, the air inside constantly circulated, staying fresh even on the lowest level. But if the enemy still managed to find the entrance, Nushabad would turn into a deadly trap. The corridors here are intentionally made so narrow and low that it's impossible to stand up straight or turn around with a sword. The invaders had to move in single file, bent over, which made them perfect targets. In the darkness, by the dim light of clay lamps, the city's defenders used a system of hidden niches for sudden attacks. In addition, deep pits with rotating stones and massive millstone doors weighing several tons awaited the uninvited guests, which could only be locked from the inside. It was a perfect design for guerrilla warfare, where every meter of the tunnel worked against the attacker. Life underground was organized with astonishing precision. The city had hidden food storage areas, sleeping quarters, and even a complex sewage system that carried waste far beyond the residential zones. Today, researchers are convinced that Nushabad is only a small part of a vast network. The Uyi tunnels may stretch for dozens of kilometers, connecting different settlements and fortresses in the region. Looking at these gloomy labyrinths, you realize that beneath the feet of Iran's residents lies not just history, but a true underground fortress, ready for a long siege. Today, amid rising regional tensions, these ancient survival technologies are becoming alarmingly relevant again. How many such cities are still hidden beneath the sands? And what secrets do they keep in their eternal darkness? The Tunguska explosion happened earlier than we thought. In the north of Yakutia, in the area of the Verkhoyansk Range, a group of geologists discovered an anomalous zone where dozens of scorched stones and trees, all knocked down in one direction, were lying in the ground. At first glance, there is nothing unusual. Fires and landslides are common in these places. But analysis showed that the charring did not occur from burning, but from a very powerful short-term thermal pulse. Within just a few days, the place was dubbed Little Tunguska. The scale of destruction there, of course, is nowhere near the fall of the famous object in 1908, but the signs are surprisingly similar. A radial pattern of melted taiga, microscopic beads of fused quartz, traces of rare metals like iridium and nickel. All of this is characteristic of cosmic impacts. Researchers are cautious in their conclusions. This may be the trace of a meteorite that broke up in the atmosphere, with only the shock wave reaching Earth. Or perhaps it's part of an extensive belt of impacts connected to the same event as the Tunguska explosion. A direct link hasn't been proven yet, but there are similarities in chemical composition. The main mystery is the age. Radiocarbon analysis of the trees and soil shows the catastrophe happened about 1,000 years earlier, not at the start of the 20th century. This suggests Tunguska-type explosions may have occurred in Siberia earlier, but when undocumented. Today, there is no crater at the site, only a scorched area and a forest that has grown over it. Scientists continue to take samples, but even if the explanation turns out to be simple, the fact remains that our planet remembers far more impacts than we are used to thinking. Unknown lunar material. When China brought back the first ever samples from the far side of the moon, they expected to see ordinary regolith, fused under meteorite impacts. But among the 5,000 fragments, they found 7 samples that upended the usual scientific picture. They contained too much olivine, a mineral typical for meteorites but not for lunar rock. Chemical analysis showed that these fragments do not match any known type of lunar minerals at all. Comparison of the isotopes of iron, manganese, nickel, and silicon gave an unexpected result. The substance is identical to Ci chondrites, the most water-bearing and rarest meteorites in the solar system. On Earth, such meteorites are almost never preserved. They are porous, brittle, and soft. They cannot survive entry into the atmosphere. On the Moon, it's a different story. Without air and without deceleration, they fly at full speed, melt, and instantly solidify, preserving their structure. These 7 fragments are the first confirmed case in history when Ci chondrites were found on the Moon in an unaltered state. And most importantly, there turned out to be much more of them than expected. According to estimates, up to 1/3 of all meteorites that have ever fallen on the Moon could belong to this type. This is not just a rarity, it's evidence of a massive bombardment that occurred when the Earth and the Moon were just forming. But the most interesting thing is something else. Ci chondrites are the main candidates for being the carriers of water and organics in the early solar system. If so many are on the Moon, it means part of this history is recorded there, not on Earth, where tectonics and the atmosphere destroy everything, but on the far side of the satellite, which has served as an archive for billions of years. The irony is that while we argue about whether the Moon is artificial or not, it was the Moon itself that first provided material that doesn't fit the usual models of the origin of water and possibly even life itself. The bronze of the mysterious lures. We are heading into the harsh and inaccessible Zagros Mountains. For almost 100 years, objects have been found here that make scientists question the official chronology of technological development. This is the famous Luristan bronze. But behind the dry scientific name lies something truly frightening and inexplicable. Imagine elegant figurines that look like characters from the darkest fantasies and legends. The main symbol of this culture is the so-called Master of Animals. It is a human figure holding 2 fantastic beasts in its hands.
Похожих на грифонов или демонов.
The strangest thing is that the faces of these creatures often blend into human ones, and their limbs turn into snakes or the claws of predatory birds. This is surrealism created 3,000 years before the word even appeared in our language. The level of detail in these objects is simply astonishing. The masters of Luristan use the lost wax casting method, which allows for the finest details to be captured, right down to the expression in the eyes of these mythical creatures. But here arises the main mystery. According to official history, the people who created these masterpieces were nomads. They didn't have permanent cities, large workshops, or stationary furnaces. How could a people who were constantly on the move establish such a complex and high-tech production of metal items? To smelt bronze, you need temperatures above 1,000 degrees in stable conditions. In the mountains under nomadic conditions, this is almost impossible. Some researchers suggest that the lures possess secret mobile forges, the designs of which have been irretrievably lost. Others see these figures not just as decorations, but as cult objects that were used to communicate with another world. These bronze artifacts are found exclusively in graves. They accompanied their owners on their final journey, and each item was unique. There was no mass production here. Each figurine is distinct and carries some kind of hidden code. Seeing these intertwined bodies of people and monsters, it's hard not to think that the ancient Zagros mountain inhabitants viewed the world very differently from us. They lived surrounded by gods and demons, whose images they captured in eternal metal with a skill that baffles even modern foundry workers. These discoveries turned the mountains of Iran into a giant cemetery of forgotten craftsmen, whose secrets are still securely guarded by cold bronze. Bread with the image of Christ. In Turkey, archaeologists found an extremely rare artifact of early Christianity, a charred loaf of bread with the image of Jesus Christ, which had lain underground for about 1,200 years. The discovery was made in Karaman province at the Topraktepe archaeological site, where the city of Arenapolis once stood. The bread is dated to the 7th-8th centuries AD, a time when Christian symbolism was just beginning to take its established forms. This is one of 5 loaves found in the same layer. All of them were preserved thanks to the process of natural carbonization, which is intense heating without access to air. On one of them, a faint embossed image of Christ can be seen, along with the inscription, "With thanksgiving to the blessed Jesus." Archaeologists note that the image does not correspond to the traditional type of Pantokrator known from Byzantine icons, but shows Christ as a sower, a symbol of fertility, labor, and the cycle of life. Other loaves bear crosses and ornaments, one of which resembles a Maltese cross. Researchers suggest that this is not just food, but a special type of liturgical bread, a prototype of the Eucharist, used during worship services. Chemical analysis showed that finely ground wheat mixed with ash and salts was used in the composition, which confirms its ritual purpose. The bread did not turn to dust even after 12 centuries. This is one of the best preserved finds of Christian ritual bread in history.
Окаменевшие волны.
The rover Curiosity has been roaming the Gale Crater, a huge basin over 150 kilometers in diameter, for 12 years now. Its cameras have long gotten used to the dust, rocks, and endless horizon. But recently, strange structures appeared in the images, rows of small ridges stretching in one direction, like frozen waves. Scientists debated for a long time about what they were. Evidence of wind, sedimentation, and tectonics. Comparing the data to Earth's sediment models erased all doubts. These ribbed patterns were left by water, real waves that lapped on the surface of a still lake. An ocean isn't required for their formation. Just 1 or 2 meters of depth and moderate wind are sufficient. That's likely how Mars's atmosphere was during that time. The water rippled, creating ripples on the sandy bottom. Then it dried up, but the imprint remained for billions of years. This discovery may seem minor, just a few square meters of terrain, but it changes a lot. Until now, it was believed that ancient Martian bodies of water could have been hidden under ice like those in Antarctica. Now we are sure that at least in one place, Mars had an open water surface where waves reflected the sunlight. Curiosity continues to climb to the top of Mount Sharp, and each new layer of sediment reveals another page of this planetary chronicle. The layer with waves is possibly the last page from the time when Mars was still alive. The Nazis' gold was finally discovered. In the summer of 2025, something began in Poland that archaeologists had feared for decades and treasure hunters had dreamed of: the official excavation of the legendary gold of the Reich. Without flashy headlines and without sensational maps, just quietly and methodically, like investigating an old murder. On the outskirts of the village of Mykolaiki in the Kashubian forest, ground-penetrating radars showed an anomaly. The depth is more than 10 meters. The shape is excellent. Rectangular, with metallic reflections. And for the first time in all these years, the Polish authorities have issued an official permit for excavation. The place has long been shrouded in legends. According to one version, this was the route of Ernst Koch's convoy, the former Gauleiter of East Prussia, who allegedly tried to take boxes of gold, platinum, and precious stones out of Königsberg. Another version claims there was an auxiliary SS warehouse here, storing documents, paintings, and church relics instead of gold. The archaeologists made no promises of treasure. Even the top centimeters of soil revealed some oddities. Fragments of metal seals, pieces of crates, wooden debris marked with the sign BSCH, an abbreviation that in the 1940s stood for Bundeslackhaus, the state mint. Officially, the press covered the excavation quietly, But behind the scenes, the adults were as happy as children. Every meter down felt like a step closer to solving one of Europe's most notorious wartime legends. Old reports surfaced, SS protocols, records from Polish foresters, about German trucks without headlights in April 1945. Everything was falling into place for a story once thought to be a fairy tale, but as work deepened, it became more of a documentary thriller. At a depth of 7 meters, there were remains of a steel grate, fragments of locks, a layer of bitumen, as if someone had tried to seal it off. Scanners showed a void beneath it. And then for the first time in many years, the local authorities allowed journalists to show what it looks like when legend meets reality. The strangest part began later. 3 weeks before the end of the season, the excavation site was suddenly sealed off. Only a small group of specialists and the police remained on the territory. Officially, it was due to the threat of a collapse. Unofficially, it was because they found something metallic but not what they expected. From that moment, the details start to differ. Some say it was a massive door set at an angle. Others talk about traces of a tunnel leading under the old road from the Reich era. The archaeologists are silent, and no reports are being published. The Polish Ministry of Culture made only one statement. Elements of an engineering structure and objects requiring examination have been discovered. That's all. No photos, no comments. It is in such an environment that myths are born. When facts are not accompanied by explanations, there is room for speculation. They say that one of the researchers who participated in the excavation resigned the day after the site was closed. Some say it wasn't gold sent to the Warsaw lab, but something that shouldn't have been handled without military personnel present. The codex that saw the future. In the Dresden Museum, there is a 12th century Mayan scroll that was long considered just a collection of incomprehensible symbols, until scientists realized that it is an extremely precise ancient algorithm for predicting solar eclipses. The Maya, they used a cycle of 45 lunar months and marked 38 new moons in which the sun could disappear. But the genius was in something else. They regularly reset the calendar at 223 and 358 months, preventing errors from accumulating. This way, the table remained accurate for centuries. Modern astrophysicists tested the model. They compared the codex with 145 real eclipses that the Maya observed. Everything matched. Moreover, this method can still be used today by simply continuing their calculations. For the Maya, an eclipse was a sign from the gods, but the calculations themselves were pure mathematics, built without telescopes or instruments, only observation and memory. And now it becomes obvious. The Dresden Codex is not an ancient relic, but proof that human beings were trying to save themselves, especially the idea of rhythm in the universe, even without technology. Algerian Atlantis. The underwater part of Tapasa is being studied today just as seriously as the ruins on the shore. Marine archaeologists who dive are documenting amphorae, cisterns, and storage niches. And most importantly, the pier carved into the rock, which looks like an engineering structure rather than a random landform. These fragments come together to form a picture of a port that operated from at least the 4th century BC to the 3rd century AD moreover. The nature of the finds suggests regular trade rather than occasional dumping into the sea. UNESCO insists on expanding protections for the surrounding waters because the surf quickly erodes the cultural layer, and without official status, the site is vulnerable to intensive diving, and then we will lose even what we have managed to see. The team is retrieving artifacts found in the spring and exploring the structure's dark outlines with new equipment. The final answer will come only after several dives and deposit analysis. Before us lies either a sunken city that was claimed by the water or the lower tier of an ancient harbor that gradually settled beneath the waves. What fascinates me here is not the word Atlantis, but the opportunity to look into the inner workings of a real port that was sustained by 3 eras at once: the Phoenician, Roman, and Byzantine. If we manage to record the layout of the docks and cisterns, we will finally understand what the coastal hub looked like, which written sources say nothing about, and the sea still conceals. The secret arteries of Iran. If the underground Nushabad was a place for saving lives, then the next engineering network became essential to an entire civilization's survival. We are used to thinking that Iran's greatest resource is oil, but for 3,000 years, the most precious resource here was ordinary fresh water. To obtain it in the sun-scorched desert, The ancient Persians created a system whose scale modern science still cannot comprehend. We are talking about qanats, grand underground aqueducts that turn dead sands into flourishing oases. Just imagine the scale of this madness. The total length of all qanats in Iran is an incredible 300,000 kilometers. To help you grasp the scale of this achievement, that distance is enough to wrap around the Earth at the equator almost 8 times. This is the longest and most complex hydraulic system ever created by human hands, without the use of machines. The most astonishing part isn't the length, but the calculation's precision. Ancient engineers, armed only with primitive levels and ropes, dug tunnels at depths of dozens of meters with a slope of just 1 or 2 millimeters per meter of distance. It was a meticulous job. If the slope was too steep, the water would quickly erode the rock and collapse the tunnel. If it was too shallow, the water would simply stagnate and silt up. The qanat lasts so long because its water flows deep underground in total darkness. This completely eliminates evaporation even in the most extreme 50-degree heat when everything on the surface dries out in a matter of hours. The construction of such a canal took decades and required the work of entire generations. The specialists, who were called mukani, had the most dangerous profession in the ancient world. A worker would descend into a narrow vertical shaft to a depth of up to 300 meters. That's the height of a modern skyscraper. In tight quarters and under constant collapse risk, he manually carved through rock, guided just by sound and air movement. The qanat in the city of Ganabad, built 2,500 years ago, is still considered the pinnacle of this craft. Its main shaft goes down to a depth comparable to the height of the Eiffel Tower, and it still supplies pure water to about 40,000 people. Militarily, these underground arteries were Iran's main advantage. While enemy armies perished from thirst outside the city walls, the defenders of the fortress enjoyed inexhaustible supplies of icy mountain water hidden deep underground. Besieging such cities was pointless. The water was out of reach for the enemy. It couldn't be poisoned or cut off without going underground. Today, these ancient corridors are surrounded by new rumors. Many of Iran's modern military facilities and secret ballistic missile depots are built using the same principles, and, as some researchers claim, are even integrated into the old qanat branches. This turns the country's underground into an endless labyrinth, where the ancient thirst for life merges with modern technologies of war. We look at these wells in the desert and see only holes in the sand, but beneath them beats the heart of a civilization that has not stopped for 3,000 years. The mysterious Idbaraks. Turkic legends remember a people with human bodies and dogs' heads, the Idbaraks. In the Oguz Khan stories, they are placed on the northwestern outskirts near Siberia. The name consists of Id, dog, and Barak, a long-haired breed. The description is consistent: dark skin, mottled fur, a dog's skull. Oguz Khan once retreated before them, went into exile, and later returned and defeated them. He gave the conquered lands to his son Kipchak, ancestor of the Kipchaks. The name Kipchak is linked to a legend of being born in a hollow tree. To understand why the dog-headed people appeared in these stories at all, we need to remember the role of dogs among the early Turks. The dog was a helper and a guide, not an evil creature. In the 12-year cycle, there is a year of the dog. In shamanic rituals, they imitated its behavior. In myths, the dog Barak carries the shaman upward, and in Altai stories, the dog guards the first people from Erlik. So one's own dog is protection and a connection with the spirits. Against this background, Idbaraki are portrayed as outsiders. They have the same dog-like traits, but instead of being protectors, they represent a boundary and a threat. This approach is understandable. It marks our world's edge and reminds us of how to behave in foreign lands. Similar parallels exist with our neighbors: Greek cynocephaly, Indian dog guardians, European chronicles about northern tribes. The pattern is always the same. An unusual face is a sign of distance. One can argue whether there was a real impression behind it: masks, totemic headdresses, or distant neighbors with unfamiliar appearances. But for tradition, that's not necessary. In legends, those on the other side were called Idbarakami. That was how they marked the boundary of their world. Ancient Egyptian antibiotics. Archaeologists have determined that the ancient Egyptians used antibiotics thousands of years before science discovered them. Research on mummies showed a high content of tetracycline, a substance that was officially discovered only in 1948. Traces of it were found in bone tissues and tooth dentin, which indicates regular consumption of this compound during life. The discovery happened by accident. Student archaeologists decided to recreate an ancient Egyptian beer recipe, following the records and illustrations they found. Chemical analysis of the samples revealed that tetracycline is formed during the fermentation process. This is explained by the presence of Streptomyces microorganisms in the wort, which are capable of synthesizing antibiotic substances. The results confirm that the inhabitants of ancient Egypt not only mastered the technology of fermentation, but also probably understood its medicinal effects. The high concentrations of antibiotics in the mummies indicate that beer was used not just as a beverage, but as a means of preventing and treating infections. At the end of August, a resident of Panama who introduced himself as Kin uploaded a video to the internet that instantly went viral. The footage shows a small stone lying on scorched ground. Something dark and shiny resembling tentacles is oozing out of its cracks. When touched, they burned leaves, and the stone itself seemed to breathe, emitting steam. Kin claims he found it in a crater after a flash in the night sky. In the first days, it seemed like science fiction, but then Kin showed that the object was growing, especially in the light. He kept it at home and later in a safe because it's calmer at night. That's when it sleeps. He claimed he sent samples to friends for analysis, but the results were never published. Scientists were in no hurry to comment. On social media, people argued whether it was an alien organism or just the common fungus Antherus archer, known as devil's fingers. It really does grow out of the ground, spreads a foul smell, and looks almost the same in the dark. But here, many things didn't add up. The shape was different, the structure was metallic, and the glow was not typical for either plants or fungi. Kin kept filming. In the last video, the object was entirely covered with growths, as if the stone had become living matter. After that, the account was deleted, and the videos now exist only in copies and mirrors. Of course, the story might turn out to be fake, but the very phenomenon of how quickly such stories gain millions of views says something else. Humanity needs a miracle, not because it's real, but because it brings back the feeling that space can invade our everyday life at any moment. Maya cosmogram. In the south of Mexico, in the state of Tabasco, archaeologists studied the Aguado Phoenix site, a huge earthen structure hidden beneath the forest. It's almost invisible in satellite images, but LIDAR, laser scanning technology capable of removing vegetation, revealed the clear outlines of a platform nearly 1.5 kilometers long. This structure turned out to be older than all known Maya centers, dating back to around 1000 BC, which is 1,000 years earlier than the appearance of their famous pyramids and cities. Around the platform, they discovered remains of canals, dams, and straight roads, all aligned with the cardinal directions. All of this looks like a carefully planned complex built without stone, only from earth and clay. Scientists call Aguado Phoenix a cosmogram. This is not a temple or a city, but rather a symbolic space, a model of the world embodied in the landscape. Judging by the findings, mass gatherings, rituals, and feasts took place here. There are no signs of kings, palaces, or sculptures. It appears this was built collectively by communities, not under a central authority. This discovery was unexpected for archaeologists. It was previously believed that Maya monumental structures appeared only after the formation of complex cities and elites. Aguado Phoenix shows the opposite. Large structures could have appeared before states as a result of collective efforts. Today, the site is being studied further. For locals, it's becoming a point of pride, and for archaeologists, a reminder that history doesn't always move in a straight line. Sometimes people create not for power, but for an idea. 18 kilometers of emptiness. If previous discoveries were isolated objects, this finding made scientists reconsider the boundaries of what is possible. In northern Khorasan is Shar Belkais, the second largest adobe city in Iran after the legendary Bam fortress. But the most frightening thing about it is not what stands on the surface, but what was discovered literally underground. During routine roadwork, heavy machinery suddenly began to sink into the ground. The clay, which had remained solid for centuries, crumbled, revealing the entrance to a giant network of corridors. When the first researchers arrived at the site, They couldn't believe their eyes. A labyrinth stretched out before them, with a total length that, according to preliminary estimates, is an incredible 18 kilometers. To give you an idea of the scale, that's a distance comparable to the length of several subway lines in a major metropolis. These aren't just narrow passages for one person. They're a complete ancient transportation network. The ceiling height in some of the chambers reaches 3 meters, and the width allows an entire group to move freely. Here, they've found rest areas, storage areas for provisions, workshops, and even complex drainage systems. But the main question is, why build 18 kilometers of empty space in a region where every cubic meter of excavated earth requires enormous effort? Archaeologists date the main structures to the Ilkhanate period, but the structure of the tunnels hints at much older layers of history. These corridors connect the citadel of Shari Belkais with remote settlements and barns. It was a hidden logistical network. While trade was bustling or battles were raging on the surface, caravans carrying gold, weapons, and important state officials moved underground. The engineering ingenuity of this place lies in its material. Clay combined with special organic additives underground over time turns into a structure whose strength is comparable to modern concrete. A perfect microclimate is maintained inside, staying cool in summer and warm in winter. But what worries modern researchers the most is how perfectly this ancient network fits into the modern map of the region. There is a theory that some of these tunnels are still used for military purposes. In the context of modern conflicts in the Middle East, such free and reliable lines of communication at depths of dozens of meters are an invaluable resource. Shahra Belkis clearly shows that Iran is not just a country on the map. It is a multi-layered fortress where under every old building there may be a road hidden, leading to the other end of the province. 18 kilometers of emptiness is only what has been officially measured. No one knows how many more such highways still lie hidden in complete silence. The uranium cubes of Haigerloch. Haigerloch is a small town in the southwest of Germany. Right under the church in a chamber carved into the rock, an attempt was made in 1944 and 1945 to start a nuclear reactor. Not a bomb, but specifically a device that could sustain a reaction on its own and operate for hours. Werner Heisenberg's team suspended hundreds of cast uranium blocks, the very same cubes, on steel cables in a tank. Heavy water was used below as a moderator. Around it, there was a protective layer, cables, and instruments. The idea behind the setup was simple. Slowed down neutrons are more likely to hit the uranium. The chain reaction should be sustained without any external tricks. If this worked, the setup would be considered operational. So what went wrong? There was a chronic shortage of material. Uranium arrived in batches of varying quality. There was little heavy water, and the chamber itself was cramped. You couldn't spread the grid of cubes as much as you wanted. The engineers adjusted the suspension distances and rearranged the clusters, adding more rows, but the setup still wouldn't work. On paper, it was almost there, but in reality, it wasn't. In April 1945, the Allied scientific group Alsos arrived here. They opened the chamber, drained the tank, and cut off the suspensions. Uranium, documents, and some equipment were taken as trophies, mostly to the U.S., with some sent to scientific centers. From then on, the cubes began their own separate histories, with new stories surfacing occasionally, like another recently discovered one. In a university basement, a physics office, or a museum, they're easy to spot. A loop mark on the edge and a dark oxide layer make them recognizable. Cubes from Haigerloch with no clear origin appear at auctions. That's where the legends come from. They were sunk during evacuation, buried in the forest, or ended up in people's pockets. The paper certificates for many samples are indeed lost, so rumors last longer than facts. The latest conspiracy theory claims the uranium cubes from Haigerloch were used in both the reactor's suspended grid and the Diglock project framework. They say that the heavy metal was used as shielding elements or as components inside the bell-shaped machine under Silesia. Just add Haigerloch, the concrete ring in Ludwikowice, the purple Xerum 525, and the surname Kamler, and the theory is complete. Under the church, they cast uranium blanks for the bell, which was supposed to dampen gravity. But when you let emotions take over, nothing remains. There are no blueprints, no material delivery records for the bell, no photographs of assemblies these cubes would even remotely fit into. The surviving samples from Haigerloch have a clear purpose in a conventional nuclear facility. Their geometry and traces of suspension indicate a reactor grid, not a time machine. Therefore, the theory that the cubes are parts of the bell remains a legend without any proof, just like the bell itself, which most likely exists only in stories. A tower made of stone. In Sardinia, in Barumini, there stands a strange structure, a 3-story tower made of huge stone blocks. No cement, no arches, no metal. Everything is held together by weight and precision. This is Su Nuraxi, the heart of the ancient Nuragic culture, which lived here more than 3,000 years ago. The tower is surrounded by a ring of smaller towers, all connected by walls, and inside, a well is carved directly into the rock. Its depth is 15 meters, and there is still water in it to this day. Scientists believe that Nuragis served as a fortress, a symbol of power, and possibly a place for rituals at the same time. The unique feature of Sunaraxi is that it has been preserved almost completely. You can climb the stairs, walk through the inner corridors, and see how people of the Bronze Age built. Each slab weighs several tons. They're laid so precisely you can't fit a knife blade between them. Excavations show this place was used for centuries, at first as a fortification, then as a settlement, later as a storage place, and even as a burial site. In the 20th century, archaeologist Giovanni Liliu excavated the site and showed it was not just a tower, but a whole stone city. The Nuragi reminded us that Bronze Age Europe was not dark. Here, people knew how to design, build, and create monuments that have stood for millennia. Glow over the volcano. When you live at the foot of an active volcano, it's hard to surprise you. Lava fountains, smoke, the trembling of the earth, all of this is part of the usual rhythm. But what eyewitnesses saw at one of the active volcanoes in Central America doesn't fit into this rhythm at all. A bright glowing ring appeared in the night sky, perfectly even and closed, as if drawn with a compass. It hovered right above the crater without changing altitude, drifting, or breaking apart. For anyone who has seen how smoke and fog behave near volcanoes, this is already strange. Hot air constantly rises, and any cloud should have dispersed in seconds, but the object kept its shape as if something was holding it from the inside. It glowed with a soft white light, as if reflecting something external. But neither the moon nor the cities in that direction could have produced such an even glow. In the video, you can see that the ring seems to turn, not around its own axis, but as a solid structure responding to the movement of the camera. And this no longer looks like smoke, ash, or any rare atmospheric phenomenon. Local geologists checked the equipment. The sensors did not detect any flashes of electricity, magnetic pulses, or gas emissions that could have created such effects. A few minutes before the object appeared, the volcano's activity decreased, heat flow dropped, and seismic vibration stabilized, as if something had calmed the system. Such cases are recorded from time to time all over the world, but most often above volcanoes, craters, and faults. Most of these places are natural energy nodes of the planet, hotspots where gases, radiation, and electricity rise. And whatever it was above the volcano, it behaved as if it was studying the work of the very heart of the Earth. There is no official conclusion. Meteorologists said it was an anomalous cloud.
Это не облако.
Space smuggling. Every era has its own secret desires, even for those who travel beyond Earth. Space is a place where everything is calculated down to the gram, but it is there that a person most often remembers that he is not just part of a mission, but a living being who needs a sense of home. Spring of 1965. Mission Gemini 3. 2 astronauts, Gus Grissom and John Young, are conducting the first test of the new capsule. Everything is going according to plan until Young pulls a corned beef sandwich out of his pocket, a real one from a cafe near the Cosmodrome. Grissom laughs, takes a bite, and then chaos begins. Crumbs of meat and bread fly around the compartment, float in the air, and stick to the instruments. In zero gravity, even a crumb is a dangerous projectile that can short-circuit the electronics. The sandwich is quickly put away, but a scandal erupts on Earth anyway. The story reaches Congress and becomes the world's first case of space smuggling. But while the Americans took the risk for a joke, Soviet cosmonauts made it a tradition. Flasks of cognac, jars of pickles, and toast sets hidden in fake onboard journals secretly appeared on board. Engineers, doctors, and technicians all knew, but kept silent. After difficult spacewalks, when the body was vibrating from exhaustion, one sip of something familiar would restore balance. When you look at the archival footage, you realize this habit isn't about breaking discipline. It's about humanity. Where everything is orderly, sterile, and dangerous, a person looks for something that reminds them of life. A small jar of pickles floating in zero gravity says more about us than any speeches about progress. We can conquer planets, but we still never stray far from our own kitchen.
Артефакт из Нового Орлеана.
In New Orleans, a married couple accidentally discovered a marble slab with a Latin inscription in their backyard. At first, they thought it was a decorative element, but the text on the stone attracted the interest of scientists. Research showed that the slab was an ancient Roman tombstone about 1,900 years old. Engraved on it is the name of Sextus Cangenius Verus, a sailor of the imperial fleet who died at the age of 42. The artifact had been considered lost since the beginning of World War II. The last record of it dated back to 1939. At that time, the stone was kept in the National Archaeological Museum of Civitavecchia, which was later destroyed during Allied bombings. After the war, the tombstone's whereabouts became unknown. It is believed that the stone was taken out of Italy by American servicemen, and later it ended up in private ownership and was used as a garden decoration. The authenticity of the find was confirmed by specialists from Tulane University and Professor Susanna Lusnia. The inscription matched the records in the 1910 catalog of Latin epigraphs. The mention of a ship named after Asclepius, the god of medicine, made it possible to establish that Ver served in the Navy during the heyday of the Roman Empire. The tombstone is currently in the possession of the FBI. Negotiations are underway between American and Italian authorities regarding the return of the artifact to its homeland. UNESCO representatives stated that this case will serve as an example of the successful return of illegally exported cultural property. The Hongshan Artifacts. The Hongshan civilization is one of the most mysterious cultures of ancient Egypt, which existed about 67,000 years ago. It left behind unusual jade artifacts depicting humanoids with teardrop-shaped heads and huge eyes. Some of the figurines resemble creatures riding water scooters or even flying machines. These images do not fit into the usual idea of ancient cultures and make you wonder who or what the masters of Hongshan were trying to depict. The unique caves of Hongshan, discovered in 1999, are also attributed to this culture. These man-made caves are striking in their size and complexity. Inside, you can see pools, bridges over rivers, stairs, and passages. The area of the largest cave is 12,600 square meters, but the real mystery lies in the marks left on the walls. They resemble modern tunnel boring machines, even though technology of that level is believed not to have existed thousands of years ago. In addition, it remains unclear where the enormous amounts of excavated rock disappeared to. Scientists still haven't found any traces of its use. Some researchers suggest that the caves and jade artifacts are evidence of contact with a more advanced civilization, possibly of extraterrestrial origin. Salt mummies of Zanjan. If the tunnels and ropes show us the brilliance of engineering, then the next discovery reveals a frightening and incredibly detailed side of life in the depths of Iran. In Zanjan province, at the Cherabad salt mine, time literally stopped thousands of years ago. Here, archaeologists discovered what at first glance appears to be a crime scene, but in fact is a unique natural phenomenon. These are the salt mummies, or salt men, from Zanjan. It all began in 1993 when mine workers stumbled upon fragments of a human body. But these were not ordinary bones. Salt, which has powerful preservative properties, completely mummified the remains, preserving soft tissues, skin, hair, and even internal organs in perfect condition. The first discovery shocked scientists. It was the head of a man with long white hair and a beard, and a golden earring still glimmered in his ear. Nearby lay his leather boots and an iron knife. Research showed that this man lived more than 1,700 years ago during the Sasanian era. To date, 6 such mummies have already been discovered, and each of them is a frozen moment of tragedy. The salt mines of Cherabad were a place of grueling labor for centuries. Most of these people died instantly as a result of the mine collapse. The salt covered their bodies, drew out all the moisture, and created a sealed cocoon, protecting them from bacteria and decay. The youngest mummy is a teenager, about 16 years old. Thanks to the exceptional preservation, scientists were able to reconstruct his diet, find traces of parasites in his intestines, and even determine his blood type. These findings matter to us not just as biological material, but as a direct window into the past. The mummies still have clothing made of cotton and wool, dyed with natural pigments that have not faded over thousands of years. The intricate patterns on the fabrics and the quality of the leather shoes indicate that ancient Iran had the highest level of textile and leather production. The gold earring and expensive fabrics found on one of the deceased suggest that not only slaves worked in the mines, but also people of high social status, possibly overseers or owners of the mines. These bodies are a living reminder of the price people paid for the riches hidden in the mountains of Iran. The Cherabad salt mines still contain dozens of unexplored corridors. Who knows how many more such time-frozen witnesses of history this place holds, turning the underground world of the region into a giant time capsule, where the line between life and death is erased in an instant under the weight of collapsing rock. A block from the Ice Age.
31-летний
From Indianapolis, Brandon Dudas decided to remove a stone that was getting in the way of mowing the lawn near his house. He started digging and realized that the rock just kept going. He hauled soil in buckets and recorded it on TikTok. The video went viral and got over 9 million views. The advice to call a crane turned out to be useful. Only with the lift did it become clear that it was a boulder weighing over 10.3 tons. According to Dudas himself, its age could be 10 to 15,000 years, dating back to the last ice age. He left the boulder and made it the centerpiece of his yard. He surrounded it with smaller stones, added mulch and soil, and planted native plants. He says he wants to install lighting. Thus, the giant boulder from the Ice Age has become a local landmark. In a People interview, he said working with the boulder made him renovate his whole yard, and neighbors said it inspired others to improve theirs too. From a geological point of view, it's simple. A glacier once brought the stone, and over many years, the soil gradually covered it. From a human perspective, it's a rare case when a problem turns into a reason to tidy up and leave a mark. Darius's gold. During the excavations in Persepolis, workers came across a stone box laid under the foundation of the Apadana Palace. Inside were two thin plates. One was gold, the other was silver. They were placed there during construction about 2,500 years ago, during the reign of Darius the Great. Both plates have cuneiform inscriptions in 3 languages at once. It was important to Darius that the text could be understood in different parts of the vast empire. He lists the lands, emphasizes his power, and thanks Ahura Mazda. This is not a decorative item and not part of a ritual. It's a statement about who built here, who owned the territory, and under which god the palace stood. The plates have been preserved as if they were just taken out of the workshop. The metal hasn't cracked, and the inscriptions are easy to read. They were deliberately hidden in the foundation, not as a secret, but as a sign for future generations, in case someone ever looks under the stone. The mineral of fire. On the eastern edge of the Martian Valles Marineris, a probe detected a strange shine, as if the dust was covered with a thin glaze. When spectral analysis confirmed the presence of iron hydroxysulfate, the scientists fell silent. This mineral couldn't have appeared just like that. Its formation requires 3 conditions: water, oxygen, and heat above 100 degrees. That means, when it appeared, Mars was still alive, breathing, and boiling. The discovery site is the Aram Chaos region, where the terrain looks as if it has been churned by a giant drill. Layers of underground ice once lay here, and then something heated them to the point of explosion. The ice melted, water burst to the surface and formed a crater lake, which existed until it evaporated, leaving behind salts and this mysterious mineral. On Earth, it's almost never found. It's too humid. It breaks down too quickly. The Martian desert became the perfect oven where minerals were baked like ceramics. Perhaps the last bursts of volcanism or movements of hot subsurface water created conditions where water and fire met at the boundary of life. The temperature at which this mineral forms speaks for itself. Mars was hot for much longer than previously thought. Not a dead world, but one still smoldering from within. Iron hydroxysulfate is not just a chemical rarity, but direct evidence that flows of heat and moisture persisted beneath the surface for a long time. And if there was once liquid water deep underground, then microscopic life could have survived there as well. Life inside a volcano. If the previous structures were built solely for war or supply purposes, then this place proves that underground in Iran, people could not only survive, but actually live fully for centuries. We are heading to the foot of Mount Sahan to the unique village of Kandavan. From a distance, this place looks like a giant anthill or a set from a science fiction movie. Here, people didn't build houses out of bricks. They literally carved their homes inside solidified lava. These unusual cone-shaped rocks are called Urns. They were formed millions of years ago, after a powerful eruption, when streams of molten material mixed with ash and mud. Over time, wind and water turned these boulders into sharp peaks as tall as a 5-story building. But the most interesting part began about 700 years ago. Legends say that the first settlers came here seeking refuge from the advancing Mongol army. They discovered that volcanic tuff is soft enough to work with, but when it comes into contact with air, it becomes as strong as granite. Inside each of these stone cones, there's a fully functional multi-level apartment. Usually the first floor is used as a livestock pen, the second and third as living quarters, and at the very top there are storage rooms. The walls can be up to 3 meters thick. This creates a unique thermos-like effect. When icy winds rage outside and the temperature drops to -20, inside, a pleasant warmth is maintained. In the summer, when the sun literally melts the stone, these caves remain refreshingly cool. The engineering of Kandavan is striking in its simplicity and efficiency. Every window and every niche is carved to make the most of the sunlight throughout the day. Staircases are carved inside the rocks, connecting the floors, and the walls are polished smooth. The most amazing thing is that Kandavan is not a lifeless museum. People still live here. Today, inside these ancient caves, you can see modern televisions, refrigerators, and even high-speed internet. The residents have adapted ancient technology to meet the needs of the 21st century, creating perhaps the most eco-friendly and secure housing on the planet. Kandavan clearly demonstrates an important trait of Iranian culture, the ability to use the features of the landscape for protection and daily life. This is living proof that people are capable of turning even harsh volcanic rocks into a cozy home that cannot be destroyed by time or wars. Stone berries. In the desert in the southwest of the United States, strange rounded stones were found, like stone berries scattered on the sand. And at first, they were thought to be weathered fragments of rock, until it turned out that similar structures appear in the legends of the Hopi people about heavenly seeds. And the same formations exist on Mars. The shape is perfectly spherical or elongated, and the surface is smooth, as if polished. Geologists call them concretions, but usually such stones form in layers, pressed by rocks. Here, however, they lay freely, as if someone had poured them out of a bag. The chemical composition is the strangest part. Inside, there are ferruginous layers that closely resemble Martian blueberries, spheres found in exactly the same clusters on Mars by the Opportunity rover. The set of elements is almost identical. The Hopi call these berries the traces of teachers who came from the red star. The scientific explanation is simpler, a rare form of mineralization and long-term wind erosion. But then it's unclear why the structures are the same in different countries, and why some of the berries seem to be scorched by high temperatures that have never occurred in these places. For archaeologists, it's a puzzle. The artifact is either a mineral or a trace of events that we cannot yet describe. But the fact remains, such forms are found both on Earth and on Mars. And sometimes nature repeats itself with uncanny precision in places where, it would seem,
Условий для этого нет.
Mysteries of the Burnt City. We are moving to the southeast of Iran into the Sistan Desert. Here, among the scorched sands, lie the ruins that archaeologists call Shahr-e-Sukte, the Burnt City. At first glance, these are just mounds of broken bricks. But excavations have uncovered artifacts here that shatter all ideas about what ancient people were capable of 5,000 years ago. The finds here look as if they were not made by hand, but with technologies ahead of their time. The most shocking find is the remains of a young woman, probably a high-status priestess. In her eye socket, researchers discovered a perfectly preserved artificial eyeball. This is the oldest eye prosthesis in human history. It is made of a lightweight material, covered with a thin layer of gold, and has an engraving of the iris. The prosthesis even had tiny holes made for gold wire to secure it. Just think, 5,000 years ago, ancient surgeons could perform such complex cosmetic operations. But that's not the only mystery. In the burnt city, they found a clay vessel depicting a running goat. In fact, this is the world's first cartoon. Spinning the vessel quickly, 5 images of the goat create the illusion of movement. Craftsmen of that era already understood animation principles. In addition, the oldest backgammon board and dice were discovered here, as well as the most complex examples of skull trepanation. The burnt city discoveries show that ancient Iran was not only home to warriors, but also a center of remarkable scientific and creative achievements, secrets that we are only just beginning to uncover. Egyptian faience. Long before the invention of glass and glaze, the Egyptians learned to create a material that combined the properties of stone and ceramics. Egyptian faience was a mixture of crushed quartz, lime, and copper compounds. During firing, a shiny bright blue crust formed on the surface as a result of copper oxidation under controlled firing conditions. By changing the composition of the mixture and the oxygen pressure in the kiln, craftsmen achieved different shades from turquoise to blue. Faience was used to create amulets, figurines, vessels, and jewelry. Its symbolic meaning was associated with eternal life and the sun reflected in the waters of the Nile. Modern chemists confirmed that ancient craftsmen possessed techniques similar to those used in fine ceramics and enameling. Reconstructed samples of Egyptian faience show the same optical properties as modern architectural coatings with metallic pigments. Research on this material is now used in creating durable coatings and design solutions that replicate the self-illumination effect of ancient faience. Vitrified forts. In the mountains of Scotland, there are ruins that still make archaeologists argue. At first glance, it's an ordinary fortification from the Bronze and Iron Ages. The walls are made of stone. There are remains of dwellings and traces of campfires. But if you look closely, it becomes clear. The stones are melted. Entire sections of the walls look as if they've been through a furnace. The rocks have fused together and turned into a single glassy monolith. This is not the result of a fire. The melting point of sandstone is over 1,000 degrees. To achieve this effect, you need to keep the fire burning for several days, creating an enclosed space where the heat doesn't escape. So someone built these fortresses and then deliberately burned them, fusing them into solid blocks. Experiments in the 20th century showed that this effect can only be achieved through artificial control. Scientists Wally Stornicroft and Veer Gordon-Childe repeated the process. They set fire to a wall made of slabs and wooden layers and covered it with clay. After 3 hours of burning, the structure collapsed, but parts of the stone really fused together. Later, it became clear that the temperature had to remain stable for several days with a constant supply of oxygen. In other words, this was a technology, not an accident. Someone, back in the times when metal was not yet in use, already understood how to control heat. Similar forts were later found all over northern Europe. More than 200 places where stone was melted by people. No one knows why it happened at that particular time. But in this strange knowledge of fire, which does not destroy but binds, there is a sense of something too well thought out for its time. As if this is not just ancient engineering, but a technology passed down long ago, the meaning of which we still cannot unravel. After all, we could see similar technology in ancient Egypt with the melted steps. The golden tablets of Darius. For the next discovery, we move to the very heart of Persepolis, once the greatest capital in the world. In 1933, archaeologists were excavating the foundation of the Apadana, the main ceremonial hall of King Darius the Great. Under the massive cornerstones, they discovered 2 stone boxes that were sealed so tightly that not a drop of moisture had entered them in the last 2,500 years. When the lids were lifted, the researchers froze. Inside each box were 2 plates, one of purest gold, the other of silver. These were the famous tablets of Darius, a type of passport from the empire left for descendants. What's most striking isn't the text content, but the remarkable craftsmanship. These plates have a perfect square shape with sides of 33 centimeters and a mirror-smooth surface. The cuneiform text is inscribed in 3 languages, Old Persian, Elamite, and Babylonian. The depth and clarity of each character are astonishing. It seems that the symbols were not simply hammered out with a chisel, but carved with a high-precision tool. The edges of each letter are so sharp that it gives the complete impression of machine engraving. Darius wanted his messages about the empire's borders, from Scythian lands beyond Sogdiana to the Kush shores, preserved. He chose corrosion-resistant metals for this. The tablets were placed in the foundation of the palace as a magical and legal cornerstone of the state. The fact that the gold and silver have retained their original luster speaks to the highest degree of metal purification available to Persian craftsmen of that time. These are not just ingots, they are a demonstration of technological superiority. Darius understood that empires fall and buildings turn to dust. That's why he entrusted his will to the most reliable vault, the depth of the foundation and eternal gold. These artifacts are still considered the standard of ancient calligraphy and metallurgy, proving that the greatness of Persia was literally embedded in every gram of its precious foundation. Monster burrows. In South America, there are thousands of tunnels. Some are as narrow as animal passages. Others are like corridors in a military base, 4 meters wide, hundreds of meters long. Who dug them? Water and lava are ruled out. Geologists unanimously say it's not natural. There are grooves on the walls, as if made by claws. In one of these caves in Argentina, they found the answer. Skeletons of 2 giant sloths, each weighing 4 tons, claws up to 20 centimeters long. They were the ones who needed tunnels of that size. It is believed that they dug burrows for generations to raise their offspring and shelter from the glacial climate. And the narrower passages might have belonged to other monsters, ancient giant armadillos. Their modern descendants also dig, just on a smaller scale. And this raises the question, what else lies beneath our feet? If such tunnels could have been dug not by humans, but by animals. A man out of time, Michel Siffre became a pioneer in the study of time and the workings of the human mind. His experiments impressed scientists so much that even NASA used their results. In 1962, 23-year-old Siffre spent 2 months in complete isolation in a cave, giving up clocks and sunlight. He wanted to find out how the body perceives time without external cues. It turned out that outside the usual 24-hour cycle, a person switches to 48-hour rhythms, and time feels different. 5 minutes seem like 2. 10 years later, he repeated the experiment, spending half a year in a Texas cave. His discoveries became the foundation of chronobiology and helped prepare astronauts for long missions. Two-headed alien. In Tibet, a strange mummy with 2 heads was discovered, which was immediately dubbed the two-headed alien. This artifact caused shock among scientists and mysticism enthusiasts. The mummy looks as if it comes from beyond this world, which gives rise to many theories ranging from mutations to extraterrestrial civilizations. Some investigators believe that this could be a ritual artifact or a cult image created by ancient people to worship unknown forces. Interestingly, the structure of the mummy looks unusual, even for mutations known to biology. The proportions of its body and the shape of its heads suggest that it could have been the embodiment of something mythical or otherworldly. Ancient Tibetan legends often mention celestial beings who visited the earth. Perhaps this artifact is an attempt to depict those whom the ancients considered gods. However, there is also a more down-to-earth version. The mummy could be the result of artificial mummification of 2 different bodies joined together for ritual purposes. A sanctuary inside the rocks. Deep within the Iranian mountains, there are hidden sites that have remained unseen by outsiders for centuries. These are the temples of the god Mithra, a mysterious underground sanctuary where rituals were performed thousands of years ago, the details of which still baffle scientists to this day. Mithraism was a religion of warriors and the elite, and its main requirement was absolute secrecy. That's why Mithraea, as these temples were called, were always built either completely underground or carved into the rock. The most impressive example of such a structure is located near the city of Maragay. This is the Mare Temple, which is a giant hall carved inside a huge hill. When you enter inside, your perception of space changes. It's not just a cave, but a perfectly weathered geometric structure. The huge dome carved in the monolithic stone is striking in its precision. The ancient builders did not use supporting columns or external supports. The entire vault is held together by engineering calculations and the strength of the rock itself. A single opening has been made in the center of the dome through which a thin beam of sunlight enters. At different times of the year, this beam falls on specific areas of the floor, serving as a kind of astronomical calendar for the priests. The atmosphere inside such temples was both oppressive and majestic. There were no windows here, and the only source of light, apart from the sun, was oil torches. Temple walls were often adorned with reliefs showing constellations and mythological scenes. Scientists still argue about how the craftsmen managed to perform such fine, detailed carving in conditions of almost complete darkness. They probably used a system of bronze mirrors that transmitted sunlight in a chain into the deepest corners of the sanctuary. But the most interesting thing is the acoustics. Due to the vault's unique shape, even a whisper at one end of the hall is clearly heard at the other. This created the effect of the deity's presence and enhanced the psychological impact during initiation rituals. The warriors who came here for consecration took an oath of loyalty that could not be broken under penalty of death. This tradition of devotion and discipline echoed through the Iranian mountains for centuries. Today, many temples are abandoned or have become mosques, but their underground chambers and subterranean structures remain unchanged. They remind us that for the ancient inhabitants of Iran, the underground world was not a place of fear, but a space of supreme, true power. While empires and religions changed on the surface, in the darkness of the rocks, ancient knowledge continued to live on, which even today makes us pause in awe at the skill of those who knew how to master stone itself. Skulls with nails. In the southeast of Spain, among the ruins of ancient settlements, archaeologists found something that immediately evokes a sense of unease: 7 severed heads. Some of them have huge metal nails driven into them, not through, but with obvious force, as if the skulls were nailed to something. But why? At first they thought they were war trophies. Enemy heads were reportedly displayed to intimidate, but chemical analysis of the bones revealed unexpected results. Not all the skulls were from outsiders. In one of the cities, 3 out of 4 heads belonged to people who came from far away, but in another, almost all turned out to be locals. And that changes everything. Because in one place, apparently, outsiders were really executed and put on display, but in the other, their ancestors' heads were kept as relics. The heads were found near houses, inside the dwellings. So this is no longer a demonstration of power, it's about memory and respect. The Greeks wrote that the Gauls kept the heads of their enemies in boxes, and Spanish mercenaries carried them on spears. But in reality, it was more complicated. Memorial marks on the bricks of history. Mehrangarh Fort in Jodhpur is one of the most magnificent structures in India, but behind its beauty lie dark pages of history. On the inner gates of Lohapole, 15 handprints of women are still visible, silent witnesses to the tragic tradition of sati. Sati is an ancient Hindu ritual in which widows were expected to burn on their husband's funeral pyre. Sometimes women did this voluntarily, but more often they were forced. This practice was officially banned by the British in 1829, but in India, it persisted until the 20th century. In 1843, after the death of Maharaja Man Singh, his wives left handprints on the wall before stepping into the fire. However, this is not the only such case in the fort's history. In 1730, 16 wives and 58 concubines of Maharaja Ajit Singh also ended their lives in the flames. The tragedies began from the very moment the fortress was founded. In the 15th century, the Saint Shidyavali Baba cursed Rao Jodha, declaring that his lands would suffer from eternal droughts. To lift the curse, the king ordered a resident of the Megwal temple to be walled up alive in the fort's walls, but the curse still seems to be in effect. Here, Maharajas have perished, tourists have fallen, and in 2008, during a stampede at the Chamunda Devi temple, hundreds of people were killed or injured. Iran's missile cities. Now we move from ancient mysteries to the most guarded reality of modern Iran. Recently, footage has spread across global media that made military experts around the world reconsider their maps. Iran has officially confirmed the existence of huge underground bases, which are called missile cities. These are not just individual bunkers, but colossal networks of tunnels carved into granite formations at depths of up to 50 meters. The scale of these facilities is astonishing. Footage from state television shows endless halls filled with launchers and ballistic missiles. The ceilings here are so high that heavy trucks can move around freely inside. These bases are designed to withstand direct hits from the most powerful bunker-busting bombs. It is believed that the main control centers are located under a layer of solid rock with a thickness comparable to the height of five-story buildings. The most interesting thing is the location of these facilities. Many of them are situated in the same mountain ranges, where, thousands of years ago, ancient Persians built their qanats and secret shelters. There is a theory that modern military engineers use already existing natural cavities and have expanded old tunnel systems. This allows equipment and personnel to be moved covertly over great distances, remaining invisible to spy satellites and reconnaissance teams. Such an underground warfare strategy makes Iran virtually invulnerable to a traditional airstrike. While a large-scale battle may be raging on the surface, an entire military machine continues to operate underground, with its own power plants, hospitals, and food supplies for many months. This directly continues the ancient tradition of making the Earth's depths into an impregnable citadel. Today's missile cities are just a modern version of what the residents of Nushabad or the builders of qanats did thousands of years ago. The Guardian from Moho. On the highlands of Peru, in the Moho region, there stands a stone statue. It's not tall, outwardly simple, but nevertheless evokes strange feelings. At first glance, it's just a carved monolith in the Tiwanaku style. Clear lines, a static pose, hands folded on the stomach. But the longer you look at it, the more it seems that the figure is somehow out of place, as if it came not from this time and not even from this continent. The statue is called Moho Waka. Its base is shaped like a cross, resembling the Andean chacana, an ancient symbol where each side represents a level of the world, upper, middle, and lower. But in this case, the cross is twisted in a spiral, clockwise, which is rare in itself and may indicate a ritual significance that has been lost over time. However, what draws the most attention is not the style or the symbolism, but the strange similarities. The pose, the statue, her hands lowered and folded on her stomach, the direct gaze, all of this unexpectedly echoes the images of the Moai from Easter Island, and even earlier with the stone steles from Göbekli Tepe in Turkey. The same composition, the same gestures, the same restraint, completely different cultures separated by thousands of kilometers and centuries, but as if they are using the same language of form. A rare giant book. In front of you is one of 12 giant books from the 18th century written in Spanish. Its size is impressive, almost a meter long. These books were created for religious ceremonies and contain detailed scripts for worship services. Leather binding, wooden covers, and pages made from tanned animal skin. All this made the book not only durable but also a symbol of the church's grandeur. Such manuscripts were intended for use in churches where clergy and the choir could read the text from a distance. That's why the letters are so large. Today, this rarity is kept at the National Autonomous University of Mexico. Scientists and restorers carefully study it, trying to preserve it in its original form. These books are a real window into the past, allowing us to see what liturgical texts looked like and what the attitude toward writing was in the era of colonial Latin America. The fortresses of the legendary assassins. We are heading to the harsh Elbrus Mountains, where the ruins stand frozen on impregnable peaks, and even the mere mention of them once sent shivers down the spines of rulers in both the east and the west. This is Alamut, the eagle's nest and the main citadel of the Order of Assassins. But if you think that all their strength was in their high walls, you are deeply mistaken. The real secret to the survival of Hassan ibn Sabah and his last followers was sealed deep within the rocky foundation. Alamut was built on top of a narrow cliff accessible by only one steep path. But the main engineering triumph of the assassins was the life support system, hidden from any besieger. To withstand sieges by entire armies for years, a complex network of storage rooms was carved inside the rock. Archaeologists discovered giant water reservoirs and grain storage rooms that went down dozens of meters. The walls of these rooms were coated with a special lime mortar that prevented the water from spoiling and the grain from rotting. Thanks to this, a handful of people could ignore an army of thousands outside the walls for several years. But the most mysterious thing is the system of secret passages. Legends claim the assassins mastered disappearing in the midst of battle. Modern excavations confirm the existence of hidden tunnels that led from the center of the citadel to concealed crevices at the foot of the mountain. This allowed spies to leave the fortress unnoticed even during a complete blockade. It was through these rabbit holes that those very assassins slipped out, whose daggers reached viziers and sultans in their own tents. The engineering of the assassins was so advanced that they used a system of light signals transmitted from one mountain fortress to another. The order had an entire chain of such underground and above-ground forts throughout Iran. Each of them was autonomous and connected to its neighbors by invisible threads of communication. When the Mongol horde finally took Alamut in 1256, they spent months just to destroy these fortifications. The conquerors were astonished. They expected to find savage fanatics, but instead they saw one of the richest libraries in the world and an engineering system that had no equal in the entire empire of Genghis Khan. Alamut still conceals unexplored cavities. Many tunnels were deliberately collapsed to hide the last secrets of the order. And today, looking at these weathered stones, it's hard to shake the thought. If the assassins could control half the world from their underground hideouts in the 11th century, what are those who possess these cities today capable of? A room, under the influence high in the Andes, within the ancient complex of Chavin de Wantar, archaeologists stumbled upon a room they weren't supposed to find. It was completely buried, with no visible entrances, no windows, no doors, just a narrow passage, as if someone had deliberately hidden this space from prying eyes. Inside, there were 23 artifacts. All of them are related to the use of psychoactive substances. Some are thin, hollow bird bones, sharp, perfectly crafted, like tubes. Research showed that traces of tobacco and DMT, a substance found in ayahuasca, remained on them. And this is where the questions begin. What was the purpose of this small dark room with inhalation tubes? Why was it isolated? Why was it built in such a way that it would be hidden forever? One of the authors of the study says this is not spontaneous shamanism. This is a ritual, strictly controlled and formalized. And perhaps it was not meant for everyone. Only the elite had access to these practices, possibly priests or ruling castes, because hallucinations here are not just a journey within oneself. This is a mechanism of power. A small room, 23 people darkness, and a hallucinogen that changes the perception of reality. Such conditions could create contact with the gods, trance, and visions. And if ordinary people believe that priests really talk to spirits, then the priests could use this as a tool both for control and for governance. Jade cicada. Before you is a jade cicada, created during the Western Zhou dynasty. This artifact is not just a decoration. It had a deep symbolic meaning. In Chinese culture, the cicada was considered a symbol of rebirth and immortality, and jade was the stone of eternity. Such a figurine might be placed in the deceased's mouth before burial, believed to help the soul enter the afterlife and be reborn. Traces of red paint found on the artifact are also important. The color red symbolized protection and good luck. The finest carving demonstrates the high level of skill of ancient Chinese craftsmen. Pay attention to the eyes, the folded paws, and the patterns that give the figurine an almost mystical appearance. Such items were part of rituals and reflected the religious beliefs of people of that era. They have uncovered the secret of a 4,000-year-old mummy. Scientists managed to uncover the secret of the mummy of the Egyptian woman Shenet Ah, which was sealed in a cartonnage without visible seams. With the help of a CT scan, researchers finally understood how she was embalmed about 3,000 years ago. Shenet Ah lived during the Third Intermediate Period, under the rule of the 22nd Dynasty. At the time of her death, she was about 30 to 40 years old, and the careful preparation of her body for the afterlife indicates her high social status. For many years, scientists could not explain how the remains ended up inside the cartonnage, finding only a small hole near the feet. However, scanning revealed a seam along the back and lacing, which provided the key to the mystery. The embalmers softened the cartonnage to make it flexible, made an incision in the back, and placed the body inside. Then they sewed up the seam and used a wooden panel at the feet for fixation. The internal organs were removed and replaced with small figurines of the sons of Horus, Amset, Hapi, Duamutef, and Quebecsinuf. Each of them protected a specific organ. It was also found that Shenet Ah had lost several teeth and the remaining ones were badly worn down, which may be related to the presence of sand in the food. The Egyptian woman's eyes were replaced with artificial ones, and her body was wrapped in expensive linen. Her brightly decorated sarcophagus emphasizes her privileged status. Ancient Egyptians prepared for the afterlife much like we plan for retirement, saving resources to support themselves after death.
Аномалии из космоса.
We have reached one of the most mysterious parts of our investigation. Modern technology allows us to see what has been hidden from the human eye for thousands of years. The use of LiDAR and satellite scanning in the deserts of Luke and Kavir has revealed structures that cannot be explained by natural causes. The images clearly show geometrically precise outlines of huge objects buried under meters of sand and salt. The size of these anomalies is astonishing. Some of them reach several kilometers in length. These are not just individual buildings, but entire infrastructure hubs buried by time. Researchers suggest that in ancient times the climate of this region was different, and beneath the lifeless dunes, there may be cities of civilizations about which not a single mention remains in the chronicles. But why haven't these sites been excavated yet? The answer might be frightening. Many of these areas have been declared closed military zones. Near the land of geoglyphs and underground anomalies, electromagnetic interference is often recorded, and civilian flights are restricted there. There is a theory that Iran has been conducting secret activities there for a long time, not archaeological but technological. It is possible that not only shards have been found under the sands, but also knowledge or resources that Iran is not willing to share with anyone. The future of archaeology in Iran is not about brushes and shovels, but about deep scanning and robotics. Strangely enough, every new conflict in the region only increases interest in these voids. The land of Iran is not just a territory, it's a huge safe full of wealth, both literally and figuratively. On land, only space compares. If there's anywhere on Earth where you can feel the breath of another planet, it's the Atacama. A strip of land squeezed between the Andes and the coastal Cordilleras hasn't seen rain for 400 years. The air here is so dry that metal rusts more slowly than a person ages, but it's this absolute lifelessness that has made the desert a prime laboratory for space research. In San Pedro de Atacama, the air smells of sulfur and salt. During the day, the heat scorches the sand up to 40 degrees, and at night the temperature drops below zero. Silence, where even footsteps sound like gunshots. Everything here is made for looking up. At an altitude of over 4,000 meters, where the thin air rings like glass, giant antennas stand in a row. ALMA, the Giant Magellan Telescope, the Very Large Telescope. They capture light that has traveled to us for billions of years and break it down into the finest bands, like a researcher who pieces together the universe's past bit by bit. When you look at these giant antennas, you feel that they are not like machines, but like living beings listening to the universe. Their aluminum ears catch the breath of stars, the cold rustle of intergalactic dust, and the echoes of distant bursts. In Atacama, a person is literally between two worlds, stone and space. Sometimes at night, local guides turn off the headlights, and the sky turns into a black dome pierced by millions of needles of light. People stand in silence and watch as the Milky Veil rises over the mountains. At this moment, it becomes clear, if there is a place on Earth where you can hear the universe, it is here, in a place where only the cosmos dries everything out. The place where Jesus healed the blind man, archaeologists found an ancient dam near the Pool of Siloam, the very place where, according to the Gospel, Jesus healed the blind man. The structure is about 2,800 years old. The dam was built in the 9th century BC, presumably during the reign of King Joash or Amaziah. It is about 12 meters high, 21 meters long, and 8 meters wide. It was intended to collect water from the Gihon Spring and from floods that flowed down the valley of ancient Jerusalem. Researchers from the Israel Antiquities Authority and the Weizmann Institute determined the exact date of construction by the branches added to the mortar. Radiocarbon analysis showed between 805 and 795 BCE, this period was marked by alternating droughts and heavy rains, which led the city's residents to create the first major water supply system. The excavation leaders note that the dam became the largest structure of its time and the oldest in the history of Jerusalem. It reflects not only the level of engineering knowledge, but also a real response to climate change. Eli Escusito, the director of the Antiquities Authority, called it one of the most significant monuments of the First Temple period.
Первый лес появился в России?
In Russia, near Luga, in the Tolmachevsky quarry, they found something you usually see in textbooks, not in the sand at a quarry, a petrified stump with real roots. The age is about 385 million years. This is the late Devonian, a time when land was just beginning to turn green. At first, everyone thought it was a Prototaxites, the ancient column-shaped organisms famous in this area, but the roots settled it. This is not a column fungus, but an actual tree. An amateur paleontologist discovered a large piece in the sand that seemed unusual and showed it to specialists, leading scientists from St. Petersburg State University to get involved. They excavated, documented, and sent the sample to the lab. By examining thin sections and tissue structure, they'll more precisely determine its species and age. It's important that the first forests were already here. The root systems held the soil, changed water runoff, and influenced the carbon balance. Simply put, this was the beginning of the forested planet we're used to. You can pile up a lot of scientific terms here, but the essence is simple. The scientists came looking for a giant fungus, but instead they found an ancestor of our forests. Now they need to compare the specimen with known Devonian trees and determine exactly what it was. Even if the species name is still in question, the discovery itself already changes our understanding of the area's past. The forgotten treasure of Girofte. The story of this discovery began in an incredibly dramatic way. In 2001, after heavy torrential rains in Kerman province, the Halil River overflowed its banks. When the water receded, the locals discovered that the ground was literally strewn with strange objects made of dark green stone. It was chlorite, a material that was valued as highly as gold in ancient times. That was when a real gold rush began. Thousands took to the fields with shovels, and soon artifacts of unmatched beauty flooded the global black market. Archaeologists realized it too late when thousands of tombs had already been looted. But what was saved forever changed our understanding of human history. Scientists discovered the remains of a huge metropolis, which they called the Girofte culture. The most shocking thing is the age of the artifacts found. It turned out that these civilizations flourished thousands of years ago, at the same time as Sumer, and possibly even earlier. Whole battle scenes are carved on the vessels of Girofte. Battles of giant snakes with scorpions, mythical creatures with human bodies and bullheads, soaring eagles. The technique used to create these works baffles researchers. Girofte craftsmen inlaid soft chlorite with turquoise and lapis lazuli so precisely that the gaps between the stones are invisible without a microscope. How could ancient people work stone with such jeweler's precision without modern machines? Many researchers are convinced that Girofte is the very legendary land of Arata, which the Sumerians praised in their hymns as a place of extraordinary skill and wealth. If that's the case, then the cradle of civilization is not between the rivers, but here in the scorched sands of Iran. But the most mysterious thing is the tablets with unknown writing found in Girofte. If they can be deciphered, the entire official history of the ancient world will be completely rewritten. Iran is like an iceberg, and we see only a small part of it above the surface. Today we journeyed from Nushabad's ancient labyrinths to modern secret military bases, and realized this land has spent centuries hiding its secrets in total darkness. Perhaps the most frightening discovery is still ahead, and it is hidden where sunlight never reaches. What impressed you the most? Be sure to share your opinion in the comments and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching. Goodbye, everyone.